Okay, so today I'm going to talk about transition to token for the CMS experiment. And I'm going to start with the motivation, which I guess it's been already reported here at this meeting, but mainly the motivation is but with the retirement of the Globus toolkit, we are heading toward the retirement of the GSI and the grid FTP tools, in particular with the OSG release 3.6, which is due this spring. And CMS and all the other views, of course, need a replacement for the parts of the infrastructure that depends on those tools. And instead of looking at writing our own solution, we are, of course, looking at industry standard solution like tokens and OAuth and identity access management tools and standards. And the areas in CMS that needs individuated 3 areas that I'm going to talk about in CMS that today that needs this transition, and they are both in the dataset data management, like dataset movement that now uses grid FTP in many places, pilot factories to see communication that uses GSI and grid FTP, and Condor daemon authentication in the CMS global pool. And there are some differences between these 3 areas, and the main one that I would like to highlight is that the third one is something that can be handled centrally and doesn't involve sites, and it's a good thing because migration campaigns always are time consuming because you have to talk to 50, if not hundreds of admins and work with them toward a migration of technology. So there are 2 areas which I'm going to cover today: workload management, and this is the pilot proxy used by the factory, which is we're trying to migrate to site token. Global pools, we're trying to migrate to ID tokens, and in the data management area, we are I'll report about the effort for migrating grid FTP to WebDAV third-party copy. I'll probably give more details about the workload management area given my background, but I'll try to give also an overview of the data management one. So workload management, the workload management in CMS is basically Gliding WMS, and the fact that we create a dynamic vanilla Condor pool on the fly. So in the image here, you can see the box in green are the one that of a vanilla Condor pool, and the sturdy part is dynamic in the sense that it's created based on the demand of job on the scheduler. So user job are submitted to Condor scheduler. There is a component of the Gliding WMS tool. All the components here in blue are for the Gliding WMS tool. There is a component called front end that looks at the pressure on the schedulers, and based on the pressure comes up with a request for sites and tells another component called Gliding factory to send pilot jobs to those file, or Gliding, also sometimes called Gliding. Those Gliding pilot jobs start the Condor start are configured and start the Condor start, which in turn connects to the collector and creates a Condor pool that can run user jobs that are in the schedulers. The VO front end is responsible for generating those called pilot proxies. The pilot proxies currently are used both for Gliding factory to seize authentication and also to Stard to collector authentication. And as a replacement for pilot proxy, we looked at site tokens, and for the part of C authentication and authorization. The old approach was to use Von's proxy to generate the pilot that are generated and renewed on the front end using a cron job. There are 2 proxy used. One as a special role that can be used for extra pledge resources. The proxy is then copied to the factory and used for submission of pilots to the CE. And as I mentioned, the same proxy is then used to communication to the central manager. And on the CE, the mapping is done through using Argus or mostly for European sites, and LC maps for US side usually. And the mapping is something like you have the DN that is mapped to a local user on the CE. With the token approach, conceptually is similar, but instead of generating a proxy, we generate a token using a profile, a client, and in this case, two clients, one for the regular pilots and one for the local ones. The tokens are generated using OpenID Connect and refresh using the OSG token renewer tool. This is the setup we have currently, not in production, but in our test infrastructure called ITB. The token, as it is the case for the pilot proxy, are copied into the gliding factor and used to submission to the CE, where a different token is used for working with the Condor Central Manager communication. And the mapping on this, and again, you need a mapping on the CE, where in this case is done through the test I've done has been done through Condor map file, which have an extra bit for telling the technology, in this case site token. And then there are two components: the issuer that issued the token and the subject of the token to identify a special token that is then mapped to a user. In this case, there would be another line for the local one, which is something I haven't tested, that's why I didn't add a line yet. And for what concerns the part of the ID token to central manager authorization authentication, in this case, we plan to use, when we have tested the usage of an ID token. For the ID token to work, we need the same signing key, Condor signing key on the collector machine and on the VO front-end machine, the Glide WMS and the Condor machines. In this way, we can generate a token on the front end that is again shipped to the factory and the C and the Glide-in. And then this token can be used by the StarD to authenticate to the collector. And this is possible because the VO front-end and the collector are using the same signing key, which has been pre-placed on both machines. This is just one of the many daemons in Condor that needs to migrate away from GSI. And this is a picture courtesy of Sakib that is highlighting the test we have been performing in ITB for the different Condor daemons and the different keys and the different flows of authentication that are using ID token. We need to use ID token in place of GSI. There is one piece which is we haven't tested yet, which is front-end to factory communication, but overall this is not too worrisome because of the three transitions that I mentioned above, is the one that is done centrally, so it doesn't require a long campaign with site admins. On the contrary, the grid FTP to WebDAV third-party copy transition is something that CMS has started doing 1 year ago, I believe, and the idea is to migrate from grid FTP to the WebDAV that allows the use of tokens instead of the X509 certificates. And you can see WebDAV as an extension of HTTP that allowed third-party copy. There are two types of authentication schemes defined for WebDAV: macaroons and site token. Macaroons with bearer token and site token with OAuth. And for the time being, CMS has been testing the usage of macaroons. So we have Rusho, which is asking FTS to move files, and FTS is going to say, tell a site, use token X and Y to transfer a file from site A. So the status of those three transitions: for the site token transition, the site token generation and refresh has been set up in the front end and successfully tested. We have successfully tested factory to HT-C communication, both with US site, specifically Wisconsin and Nebraska, and with European site, NAF. We have been currently using only one token for all the CEs, and this is a difference. If you are listening to the talk Brian gave, he mentioned he's using one token per CE. So this is probably something we should look into, but requires some changes in gliding WMS. Grid FTP is still used to transfer file to ArcSys, and HT Condor 9 supports ArcSys, the ArcSys new REST interface. We need some changes in glided WMS to support it. The ArcSys interface is only available through usage of X509 certs, regular OpenSSL that doesn't involve GSI, so it's not something we are in a hurry to migrate. But our token support is not there yet, and the timeline for deployment of the new ArcSys REST interface on, of course, the non-US sites is not clear. And probably tomorrow hands-on session is a good opportunity to bootstrap a token transition campaign for the US CE admins, US HT-C admin. For non-US HT-C, I've been with the test I've been doing with the CNAF admin. There has been some comments about the usage of Argus for role mapping. So that might be something relevant for non-European, for non-US sites. The ID token transition for the global pool, we have in an advanced testing phase in ITB. Only few demos, mostly front-end to factory communication, has not been tested yet. And this is not something require a long campaign, as I mentioned before. And one thing that has not been considered yet is that CRAB uses, again, GSI authentication and Argus for authentication to the CMS scheduler. And it uses Argus to map CMS users, DNs, so CMS DNs to a pool of accounts. So this is something that for which an alternative solution is not identified yet. For it concern the grid FTP to WebDAV transition, again, that has been a long process. They require the sites to enable the WebDAV endpoint, and this has been worked like conversation initiated by the CMS by opening a ticket to the site, then some manual test plus verification of the storage.json are done, and once the load test on a test instance of the site succeed, the site is put to production and configured. And currently, WebDAV has been deployed on all the tier 1 disk endpoints. 31 out of the 47 tier 2s has completed the transition, and only few tier 3 has been started working on it. Send test have not been set up, and we are waiting for fixes on the GFAL Python interface for that. And this is a picture that shows that we are only a few percentage of the GSI FTP of the file are transferred over GSI FTP. So in conclusion, I report about 3 main areas undergoing important changes in the authorization and authentication due to GSI and grid FTP retirement. The WebDAV is in a good shape, and there is a solution. There is a problem about tape transfer, and a solution for SRM plus HTTP has been tested and verified. I think we are ready to start a campaign for side token and HT condor series communication. Hopefully, this will not be not an intrusive campaign for HT condor series, because site admin will need to update the software to the latest version and add the mapping for the CMS site token, so shouldn't take long. Maybe it's a bit more difficult for European side, that where Argus is used for mapping and the software is not taken from the OSG official repository. And for what it concerns the migration of the global pool to ID token, this is also on our radar, and something likely can be handled centrally. And we need to identify a solution for the CRAB server authentication with the scheduler that still uses GSI and Argus. And that's all from my side.
Okay, thanks very much, Marco. We've got a couple of minutes. We can take one or two questions. I see Steve's got his hand up. And then Justus after that.
So the question is, you showed a SCED on your diagram of the testing ITB. Is it thought that CMS users will eventually authenticate themselves to the global pool with tokens rather than with X509 going forward?
You mean CMS? You mean CMS user is something that I didn't draw in the picture. So this is the part that is actually still unclear, because right now CMS users authenticate using the user proxy. So they using their DN. Their DN is then mapped using Argus to an account. And so this is something that we have not identified a solution for this yet, because I believe GSI authentication and mapping through Argus is going away in the spring, because Condor will not support it anymore in OSG 3.6.
Okay, Justus was next.
Hey, Marco.
Hey, hi, Justus.
Quick question. On this slide, I see migration of a global pool to ID tokens, CRAB server on slide 13. If you can go back. What about the jobs itself? I mean, jobs itself use the WOMS proxy to stage out. What's the plan for that?
So the plan for that is, again, we haven't discussed that. We need to sit down with the CRAB development team, but I believe a good plan would be to use some sort of token, like Brian was mentioning his talk for OSG, a token dedicated for stage out. I think that would be the ideal solution. The timeline for that is unclear. So we are still going to ship the X509 proxy. This is not going away in spring. The WOMS proxy will still work. We're still going to be able to generate an X509 proxy that you can verify using OpenSSL in place of GSI, I believe. So this is something we are still going to ship on the worker nodes. So it's something that is not probably so urgent, but it's again, is on our radar.
Okay, very quickly then, Todd and Brian. Todd's first. There.
Yeah, nice talk. The use of CRAB, I agree with CRAB using Argus for mapping. Do you know, is that mapping dynamic? You know, does the actual GSI DN to an identity? Is it static, or does it change every time? Or, could it be represented pretty easily in a just kind of a static flat file that's only updated occasionally?
It's kind of dynamic in the sense that if a user is not part of CMS anymore, is pool user, so CMS 005 can be reused for a new user. We only have 2,000 of those users. We have been reusing them.
Yeah, but if that update happens, say daily or something, it isn't
daily,
dynamic to the
something
point
like
that it needs to happen several changes per minute or something like this.
No, it's daily.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Okay, lastly, Brian, then we think we need to move on. Bakju, can you put your question in the Google Doc?
Couple comments and maybe seeding some things for further discussions, Marco. One is IAM has a nice API that would allow you to build that. Here it wouldn't be the DN, it would be the subject to Unix user mapping if you want. It's reasonable RESTful API. A couple of people have already used it. It'd be great to walk through how to build up that query. You're obviously not the first person to ask about that.
For the CE mapping or for
the Argus one for Crab.
Okay, that's great.
Yes, similarly from the Crab server to the SCEDs, you probably want to also replace that with ID tokens. The other thing to think about is in Condor, we're doing some work to prevent people from needing a Unix user account in order to submit jobs. So it might be that you just don't need that mapping in the first place if we want to explore a couple future user figures. And then finally, for the question about Crab and stage out, Fahwi did us all a favor by copying into his slide 3 the WLCG token transition timeline. And the goal for next year is to make sure that storage services can consume tokens so that they have the token consumption plug done. That at the end of the year, Ruscio can use the token auth, which is a very constrained case. And then finally, for that stage out that I think it was Justas that brought up, for stage out for tokens, that's March 23. So we should talk. I think the Condor Credmon and appropriate privileged OAuth client from IAM can cover that stage out needs, but that is one that's still, what's that, more than 18 months away. So the fact that we're kind of still at the whiteboard and we know how to put the pieces together but don't have them in production yet, I think is fine.